Gather round, friends, and get cozy. It's time for another captivating episode of the FAFO Files. Whether you're curled up on the couch, settled in your favorite chair, or wrapped in a warm blanket, get ready for a story packed with despair, mayhem, and unforgettable twists. So let's dive in. Welcome to the FAFO Files.
A change of heart. Angela Martinez had always prided herself on her independence and work ethic. A single mother to 16-year-old Liam and 13-year-old Emma, she juggled 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. She believed deeply in personal responsibility and the promise of hard work, values she thought were reflected in her conservative voting choices. When she cast her vote in the last election, she was confident that the economic policies would ease her burden, lower taxes, reduced regulation, and a stronger economy. But reality had been far different. Over the past year, everything seemed to spiral out of control. Rent soared far beyond what she could afford, grocery bills were staggering, and gas prices drained her wallet with every trip to work. Even as Angela scraped together every penny, the landlord's demands for timely payment were relentless. When her final plea for an extension fell on deaf ears, she was forced to load her family into their aging car, their few possessions crammed into the trunk. The nights were cold, and hunger gnawed at all of them. Angela would give her share of food to her children, but it wasn't enough. Liam and Emma were frightened, their once bright spirits now shadowed by anxiety. One night, as they parked near a dimly lit grocery store, Angela left to use what little cash she had to buy bread and peanut butter. She didn't see the group of teenagers hanging around the parking lot until it was too late. "Hey, lady," one of them called out as she approached her car. Angela quickened her pace, clutching the bag of groceries close to her chest. "Nice car," another said mockingly, stepping in front of her. Angela's heart pounded as she realized they were blocking her path. One of the boys snatched the bag from her hands, spilling its meager contents onto the ground. She screamed for help, but the parking lot was deserted. Another shoved her against the car, and she felt hands rifling through her pockets, taking the few remaining bills she had. "Please, I have kids!" she cried, desperation choking her voice. The group laughed cruelly and ran off, leaving Angela trembling in the darkness. She gathered what little she could and climbed back into the car, where her terrified children clung to her. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice wavered. "We're going to be okay." The following morning, Angela resolved to seek help. She remembered a flyer she had seen for a church outreach program and drove there, humbled but desperate. The pastor, a kind man named Reverend Samuels, welcomed them without judgment. The church offered them a place in its shelter, a modest but safe room with beds and warm meals. For the first time in weeks, Angela felt a glimmer of hope. As days turned into weeks, Angela became involved in the church's community efforts. She met immigrants struggling to send money back home, families who had lost everything to medical bills, and elderly people trying to survive on meager pensions. Her old prejudices began to crumble. These weren't people taking advantage of the system. They were people like her, caught in a system that seemed designed to break them. One evening, the shelter was thrown into chaos. Government agents stormed the building, their faces grim and their weapons drawn. Angela and her children huddled in a corner as agents dragged away several of the residents, accusing them of being undocumented immigrants. The cries of frightened children and the pleas of parents filled the air. Angela clutched her children tightly, her body trembling with fear and anger. "Mom, what's happening?" Emma sobbed. Angela could barely find the words. "I don't know, baby," she whispered. When the raid was over, the shelter was eerily quiet, its sense of sanctuary shattered. Angela's heart ached for the families torn apart and for her own helplessness. She realized how wrong she had been. Wrong to assume that her struggles were unique. Wrong to believe that the government's policies wouldn't harm people like her. That night, as she watched her children sleep, Angela wept. She was remorseful, not just for the choices that had led her family to this point, but for the way she had dismissed the suffering of others. Now, she was one of them, poor, desperate, and unsure of what the future held. She whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for all those who had been cast aside. And for the first time, she promised herself that if she ever had the chance to vote again, she would do so with compassion in her heart.
Thanks for tuning in to the FAFO Files. We hope you enjoyed this story of another naive person messing around and finding out. Don't forget to subscribe and share if you're loving the stories. We've got plenty more where this came from. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and remember, sometimes people just gotta FAFO. See you in the next episode.